We ask those who serve to do a lot of different things. One of the most difficult is transitioning back to civilian life after service. Some veterans during their transition find themselves encountering the justice system, further exacerbating their difficulty in functioning as a civilian. Stay with us as we talk about veterans and the justice system. Thanks for tuning in to Veterans Voices. I'm Nathan Johnson. Tonight we are talking about veterans and the justice system. If you want to be part of the conversation, call us at 925-313-1170. Send us a message through Facebook at Veterans Voices 1 or email us at veteransvoices@contracostatv.org. We will be having an in-depth discussion with legal experts and hear from veterans who have been incarcerated. First, I want to welcome Contra Costa County Deputy District Attorney Derek Butts and Public Defender Brandon Banks to the show. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both for being here. I've worked with the two of you for probably 3 or 4 years now in the Contra Costa County Superior Court Veterans Treatment Program. And although the three of us are very familiar with it, I'm sure our audience is probably just hearing about it for the first time. So I'd love to hear from the two of you in regards to what is Veterans Treatment Court and what is the specific role that you have. I know there's a lot more detail that we'll get involved in over this segment, but let's just give our audience maybe a quick overview of what this program is.
Sure, it might be interesting to see different perspectives. I think we have them, but from the prosecution perspective, you need a prosecutor in the room when cases are being resolved, and we can help facilitate deals. But ultimately, the reason I'm there and I'm interested in veterans and their outcomes is to see the proper application of the law to deserving veterans to receive the benefits of the statutes which have been enacted to smooth their transition when they get tied up in some legal problems.
And one of my roles as one of the assistant public defenders in the Contra Costa County Public Defender's Office is to participate in Veterans Treatment Court. And I work with the clients that come into Veterans Treatment Court to help resolve their cases, to shepherd them through the Veterans Treatment Court program. The Veterans Treatment Court program generally is an alternative approach to the traditional court approach. It's a treatment-based court rather than a punitive-based court, and the court offers a lot of support, a lot of resources to veterans that are connected to the criminal court system. So it's a different take on what we normally see when people come into the criminal court system.
So are veterans something new as a model of the criminal justice system? Are there other courts like Veterans Treatment Court? And what has been the success? I know I've been participating and have seen successes from my perspective, but what do you think has been the success of Veterans Treatment Court at this point?
Well, I think a number of people have benefited tremendously. By my count, we've had 11 actual graduates who've had their cases dismissed, all fines and fees. They get treatment for a couple of years, and it's really, especially if they have a felony case, it's a huge benefit to them to not be burdened by all the baggage that comes with a felony conviction.
I would agree with that.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Oh, I was just going to say, I would agree with that perspective. I think that Veterans Treatment Court has been a significant success in Contra Costa County. Certainly, it's not the only Veterans Treatment Court program in the state, but it certainly is a robust program here in Contra Costa County. The recidivism rate for individuals that come through Veterans Treatment Court and graduate is incredibly low. And I think that's based on the model that's been developed in Veterans Treatment Court generally, but specifically has a lot to do with the role that Judge Brady plays in Veterans Treatment Court and the role that both I play and probation plays and the prosecution plays.
We started in 2017, and we see, couple hundred people so far. But I think these courts have been going on in California since the early 2000s at least. I first became aware in 2012 with Judge Brady's, spearheading this in 2017. We got rolling, and now we often see 20, 30 people once a month in the courtroom.
So I'm glad you're mentioning these other components of Veterans Treatment Court in terms of people involved. Maybe you can give our audience a bit of an understanding of what the role of the judge is, what the role of probation is, the DA and public defender, and maybe what's unique in regards to Veterans Treatment Court being that all of these components work together, which might be different in other courtrooms.
Sure. Brandon, do you want to try that one first?
Sure. I think a primary component of the Veterans Treatment Court program is really de-emphasizing the punitive component and emphasizing the treatment component. So what we see with a lot of veterans, and they're not unlike other people that come to the criminal court system, a lot of the veterans we see have dealt with a lot of trauma, a lot of harm in their life, and sometimes they will have stumbles even during the Veterans Treatment Court program. They will sometimes have relapses, but the way that we address those issues is not by putting them in jail or putting them in prison. It's by offering them even more resources and offering them more help. So it really is kind of a new and innovative way of approaching people that come into the criminal court system with these charges.
And as a prosecutor, it can be difficult to accept that approach, but that's what's necessary. A good example is the case we have, a fellow that's been in the program now about a year. He was alleged to have, while driving drunk, brandished a firearm at another motorist. And normally we take a pretty dim view of that kind of conduct, but he presented with the offer of proof that he was a veteran and he was suffering from trauma, abuse from the military. And so I called the victim and because it's more serious, sought their input, and they were supportive. And the defendant seemed to be pretty earnest about it. So here we go. He's well on his way to graduating, and instead of going to jail and having a gun charge, he's going to have this wiped from his record.
Yeah, it's remarkable. You mentioned a couple things there, I think, which I'd like to kind of delve into a little further. You mentioned the victim being a part of this process. So veterans, in lieu of incarceration, seek treatment. Through the victims you've spoken to, or on either side, is that generally welcomed? Are they seeing that rehabilitating or seeking treatment for this veteran is a better alternative than incarceration?
I think if you present that clearly for the right case to the victims, and I'm thinking of another one where a veteran was under the influence, traveling at a high rate of speed, and crashed into a couple and really pretty seriously injured them. So it was a felony DUI with injury. And I remember talking to them, and they were also pretty supportive. But we have to keep in mind that the cases that are eligible for Veterans Treatment Court are felonies, but not violent felonies as defined in the penal code. And then there's a presumption against serious felonies as defined in the penal code. And that would be actual shootings or where people suffer great bodily injury. And those types of victims, I would imagine, would be less receptive when they've been injured, hospitalized, things like that.
And Nathan, there really is this restorative justice approach that takes place in Veterans Treatment Court. So when you involve the victims and you involve the person that's been accused of the crime or convicted of the crime, and the victim understands that if this person is provided with certain resources, it not only makes them safer, it makes the community safer. And I think when it's framed that way to people that have been victimized in these ways, and I think they're more comfortable with people getting services and people coming back into the community in a safe way.
Well, I appreciate this conversation so far. We have about 5 minutes in this segment, so I want to take this time to invite our audience to participate in this conversation. We have Derek and Brandon from the Veterans Treatment Court representing the district attorney and public defender's role in Veterans Treatment Court. And this is an alternative to incarceration for veterans who have incurred the legal justice system as a result of a service-related occurrence or injury. A typical example, as Derek mentioned, is someone who, as a result of their military service, had a mental health condition and ended up driving a vehicle under the influence. And we would hope the Veterans Treatment Court would provide them with treatment so that they could recover from those illnesses. Another thing was mentioned I want to come back to is this veteran gets their life back. So if they successfully complete Veterans Treatment Court, what is the outcome in terms of how it affects this veteran's ability to seek employment, or just restore their dignity as a veteran who served honorably for our country?
That's a really significant and positive part of the Veterans Treatment Court program. Many of the things that we work on just globally as public defenders, but specifically in the Veterans Treatment Court program, is removing barriers for the veterans. So removing those barriers to getting a job, to getting housing, to being reunited with their family and being reintegrated into the community. And what happens when a veteran graduates from the program, as we mentioned before, is that case is dismissed, it's expunged from their record, which helps them, allows them to continue to work or to become eligible for employment.
And the statute specifically says, and I brought a copy of it so I could read it, anticipating this moment, that they're not required to disclose the act, the arrest, or the fact that they had a case dismissed when they're asked on employment. Now, there are some things that linger, like if they were convicted of a felony, they can't have a gun, or if they're trying to be a police officer, they have to tell about this experience. But these types of things that they don't have to tell a prospective employer are huge, I would think. Not to mention the fact that we typically don't require them to go to jail, and then all the fines and fees are dismissed. So they don't start out in the hole.
That's great. I know that, through efforts like East Bay Stand Down and other stand downs throughout the nation, those are similar efforts to try to restore that veteran's dignity and the ability for them to get housing and employment and become productive members of the community. What are some, I know you mentioned there's been graduates, but what are some of the success stories in terms of how those veterans have been able to give back to their community? I know one Veterans Treatment Court graduate, I think, actually became a mentor in the court, didn't he?
That's correct. And that's not unique, because I think of many of the individuals that come through Veterans Treatment Court and complete it successfully or graduate, they've made this investment and they want to pay it forward. They want other people who are in their position to succeed. So I think part of coming into the Veterans Treatment Court is people that graduate successfully, they develop a sense of ownership and they want to see other people succeed as well.
Fantastic. We just have about a minute. Derek, Brandon, what would either of you say to a veteran out there who's watching tonight who maybe has just encountered the legal system and is wondering whether Veterans Treatment Court might be a good option for him?
Get a public defender or an attorney and ask to look at that program because it could be a huge benefit to them.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's certainly an option if you're a veteran. It's certainly an option to look into. There are significant services that are not traditionally available through the criminal court system. So it's certainly something that people should consider.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both. I know that neither of you are veterans, but you really have committed yourself to serving the veterans community. And I thank you on behalf of our community for that additional work on top of your other workload. And to Judge Brady, the probation department, the VA, all of the elements that are involved in Veterans Treatment Court. Appreciate everything that you do for our veteran community. When we come back, we will hear from some veterans who have been through the justice system. But first, we pay tribute to a World War II veteran who earned 2 Silver Stars in this month's Shadow Box. First Lieutenant John Sallin was a native of Syracuse, New York, and served in the Army during the Second World War. He received the Silver Star for gallantry in action near Bastogne, Belgium, in 1944, when he personally destroyed 2 German tanks at great personal risk. He earned a second Silver Star near Neubourg, France, in 1945. He was a resident of Madison County until his death on November 25th, 2001. We are talking about veterans and the justice system. Want to be part of our conversation? Call us at 925-313-1170. Send us a message through Facebook at Veterans Voices 1 or email us at veteransvoices@ContraCostaTV.org. Now we want to add two veterans to the show who have both been previously incarcerated. I want to welcome Marine veterans Ron Self and Tommy Parker. Welcome, gentlemen, and of course you're joining Brandon and Derek in our previous conversation. Before we get into your personal stories, just give us a quick little introduction about your military service.
All right, well, first of all, thank you for having me this evening. I was in the Marine Corps. I was in 3rd Battalion, 5th Marine Regiment, and I deployed with them to Sangin, Afghanistan, September 28th of 2010. And while conducting counterinsurgency operations in the Helmand province, I stepped on an improvised explosive device, resulting in the amputation of my right leg at the knee, my left leg at the hip, and my left hand except my thumb. After that, you would think I'd probably be tired of adversity, but I decided to beta test narcotics for the better part of a decade, ultimately resulting in my incarceration for a total of 18 months. But then after I got out and found actually an incredible woman helped me turn my life around. And now I am an endurance racer. I've done 10 half marathons in a wheelchair, 2 full marathons, and I'm currently training for an Ironman.
Thank you, Tommy. Ron?
How you doing? Like Tommy, I'd like to say thank you for having me. I served in the United States Marine Corps from 1987 to 1997. 8 years of that, I was downrange in combat operations. Shortly after coming back stateside in 97, I shot somebody, was sentenced to 32 years to life in prison. During that time, I founded a program called Veterans Healing Veterans from the Inside Out. It's currently funded by the state of California, and I work with the incarcerated veteran population in the California prison system. And I am branching out to Colorado, and we're starting to work with the federal system as well as DOD on a boot camp out program for military people before they leave the military, so they don't make some poor choices like myself and Tommy made.
Ron, I hear a lot of recognition of the path that led you into the justice system. It seems that maybe your perspective is unique as a veteran in regards to the crimes that you were convicted of and the time that you were in service, or do you think that this is a result of the help that you've received and the program that you've been innovative in?
So actually, while I was in the Marine Corps, I received some education for psychological warfare. So I have a BA, a master's, and a doctorate in sociology. That was for a different purpose in life, obviously. What I found while I was in prison was that there were no programs for veterans with PTSD or moral injury or survivor's guilt and a lot of other stuff that comes along with being a combat veteran. And as a result of that, and my own issue with suicidal ideation, actually, I tried to hang myself and the rope broke. I decided to take some time and create a program that I eventually sent to the American Psychiatric Association to get their approval and to do a pilot program for PTSD for incarcerated veterans. That was approved by the California Department of Corrections. We did a pilot program, and within a year of that pilot program, the California Department of Corrections was offering to give me funding to replicate the program at other institutions. So I actually had to become a nonprofit, hire someone, because obviously as a prisoner, I couldn't accept their money. And it just kind of went from there. I did a TED Talk that got me working with Pentagon and DOD in Washington. So the Veterans Court, I think you were talking about that earlier. That's a really good thing. For me, that wouldn't have helped, as David was saying, my crime, I actually shot somebody. There was a gun involved. Having said that, I think a lot of the veterans deserve Veterans Court. I also think there are people like myself that needed to be confined, that needed to be locked up for a period of time, so I could actually stop and look at myself in that metaphorical mirror, so to speak, and course correct. I appreciate what the public defender Brandon and David or Derek are talking about. I think they're phenomenal what they're doing. I also think there are veterans like myself that needed a timeout.
Let's talk more about that, because I saw some nodding heads. In terms of a timeout, how does that timeout occur? Is that just time in solitarity, or I'm struggling over the word.
That's prison.
Solitary
That's
confinement,
prison.
or time alone, or time away from the pressures of life, or where does this time come from?
I think there's many modalities that take place. Speaking as a Marine, alpha type guy, there's a lot of different ways one could approach that. Going on a retreat, going off on a hike on the Pacific Coast Trail. For me, I needed to be locked in a 4x12 cell and forced to look at myself. That's hard to say, but it's what I needed. I was in denial, so to speak. And I needed a hard timeout, and I got it, and I needed it. And for me, that was prison. That was a sentence of 32 years to life, where I really had to look at myself and look at my actions and how I not only affected what I believe is my true family, the Marine Corps, my brothers, but also society. I mean, I don't want to speak for Tommy, so I won't, but most of us in the Marine Corps, we joined the Corps to help protect people that can't protect themselves, and to protect our brothers on our left and our right. And what I did in trying to stop somebody from being killed, I affected a lot of people. I caused a lot of psychological trauma, discharging a weapon in America on a freeway. Yeah, I don't want to try to rationalize or justify it, but I needed the timeout that I got.
Yeah, Ron, I think it's really important that you're sharing this. I'm definitely interested in hearing from Tommy and even from Derek or Brandon in regards to how important it can be to allow someone this time to reflect on where they're at and where or how they got to this place of interfacing with the criminal justice system.
I kind of had something similar to what Ron said, I guess. I apologize. I had something stuck in my throat. Anyway, but no, so I needed a timeout as well. You guys were just speaking about Veterans Court. And I went through Veterans Court, or partially, I guess, let me clarify. So prior to my sentencing, they tried to put me into Veterans Court. But that was before I had even been prosecuted or even brought up on a charge. It was a weird situation where they were trying to get me to bring attention to what I was doing wrong. But I wasn't willing to pay attention to what they wanted me to do. I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And I continued to do that and had my house, a house that was given to me by a nonprofit, raided back to back in 3 months by the sheriff's department, in attempt to prosecute me. The first raid, they did illegally. They came in without a warrant, and they tried to lean on me and the people in the house. But then the second time they came in, they didn't really find a whole lot. I admitted to possession of a syringe with heroin liquid in it. And that is what my possession charge was. Actually, maybe Brandon will laugh at this. My attorney told me when I went in to meet with him that there's nothing I can do, Tommy. Like, you shouldn't have opened your mouth. We have a body cam of you admitting to that being yours. But I didn't care. And actually, after the first time I went to jail, I cared even less. After the first time that I went to jail and sat time, and it wasn't a whole lot of time, it was under a year. But after the first time of doing it and knowing that I was capable of doing it, I didn't care. Like that, I was put into the veteran court program after I was prosecuted, but it wasn't put into my judgment that I had to do it. So I was being forced to jump through hoops that actually wasn't decided by a judge. Other people were trying to force me or help me, and I ended up withdrawing from it. But I was a weird case being in rural Montana where I was over an hour away from the courtroom. So it was difficult for me to get there every month, especially because I didn't have a handicap accessible vehicle and everything at the time. But I do think the program is good and works for people. It wouldn't have worked for me, though, because I was too defiant. I didn't want to listen. I wasn't done beta testing narcotics. And sadly, it was the same narcotics repeatedly. I don't know if I just had to find out every day if I liked them, but I continued to do it. And it doesn't make sense. I'm talking too much. Somebody else chime in.
No, I think what you're sharing is good, and I think I wanted to reflect on that, or give the opportunity to Derek and Brandon to reflect on that as well.
Yeah, I've seen some folks come through, and they're clearly, in my view, not down for this. And you got to be there. I'm not an expert on addiction, but you got to be ready. And some of them aren't, and it's clear they're not, and they shouldn't be there, in my opinion. But for the folks that seem to be ready or just about ready, we're pulling for them.
And that's got to be an incredible or incredibly difficult from the defense and the prosecution standpoint. To preface this, I'm now friends with the prosecuting attorney that convicted me, or aided in convicting me. I don't know if that's the right words, but anyway, to try to enter into these things, because unless we're rude or disrespectful, I don't know that you hate us or that you don't like us. And a lot of people think for some reason that you want to bury us under prisons, and I don't think that that's the case. But our actions make you think that way, because you're trying to help us, but we don't care. Or at least that was my experience.
Can I jump in here real quick, Nathan?
Yes,
that's
please.
Okay. So I think that we overemphasize incarceration, and I think we overemphasize punishment. I think that what Ron has described and what Tommy has described is a life where they suffered an extraordinary amount of trauma and harm as a result of their service to the country. And I think far too often that goes unrecognized, particularly in the criminal court system. In fact, I think that there has been a movement more recently to ensure that when people who have served our country, have made sacrifices for our country, that actually is a mitigating component when they are standing in front of a judge. And I think I understand that both Ron and Tommy feel like they needed a timeout. They need to be removed from the community to do some self-reflection. But I think far too often that's forced upon people, and particularly veterans who have suffered significant trauma. I think listening to Tommy talk about his substance use disorder and the struggles that he had with an addiction, and the fact that he had to serve significant time in custody when he was self-medicating for what he went through, I think was a failure of the system, in my opinion. And I think we should be moving toward restoring the lives of individuals that have gone through the harm as a result of serving the country, rather than removing them from the community.
This is a really good conversation. I'm glad we're having this. What we're hearing is different perspectives, and this just really shows and highlights the complexity of the legal justice system. And it sounds like there's not just one easy answer. For some veterans, like Ron and Tommy, what they needed was that really abrupt, isolation and removal from their environment. But there's the option for the Veterans Treatment Court. But what I'm hearing is the veteran really needs to be ready for that. And at the same time, we need to keep in mind that putting someone in prison and locking them up for a extended period of time may not recognize the service that they gave to their country prior to that incursion. I want to include our audience in this conversation because we've got lots of good details here happening between our guests, and I want to invite our audience through Facebook or through email to jump in with some questions or comments. Maybe you can share your experiences in regards to the legal justice system. Ron, I want to come back to you real quickly. You said that this really helped you by giving you a timeout. What about this timeout do you think helped you the most? You said there's a lot of introspection, a lot of reflection and such. But do you find that you also bonded with other veterans or with others who were struggling in the same way while you were in the prison system?
Yeah, I'd like to back up a little bit here. I'm going to answer that question directly. What I encountered in the prison system, of the 6,900 veterans currently in the California Department of Corrections, at least half of those are Vietnam era veterans. those veterans, clearly there was no veterans court back in the day. There was nothing for PTSD, suicidal ideation, so on and so forth. What I encountered was a bunch of those guys, Vietnam combat veterans that had to help themselves. And they helped me. So I sought out that population. They sought me out. And it was really that era that helped me realize that the military didn't put me in prison. The justice system didn't put me in prison. I put myself in prison, and I needed to be accountable for that. Not playing the victim. We all have our journey, our trials and tribulations in life, but just like Brandon and Derek were talking about before, when we're dealing with alcoholics or people using drugs, or I think Tommy, you mentioned it, until you acknowledge you have a problem, you can't fix the problem. As a veteran, I was in denial for a long time about having PTSD. I absolutely had PTSD. All kinds of stuff going on with me. And I refused to admit that. And it took some elderly veterans in the prison system to just sit me down and say, hey, look, you're your own worst enemy. You need to look in that metaphorical mirror, and you need to be accountable for who you are. One of the things that I wish I said, and I say it a lot, it's almost a cliche anymore, is that at one point in time, as a veteran, we were trusted to carry a weapon in defense of this country. And I did something to violate that trust. I may never gain that level of trust back, but I'm okay spending the rest of my life trying to get that trust back. And if I never achieve it, that's okay. And on that journey, I very much enjoy working with prosecutors, the public defenders, the justice system as a whole, and veterans, and helping them identify non-punitive measures, non-punitive ways of addressing these problems. And to do that, we have to look at ourselves and not paint the role as a victim.
Well, Ron, this is really good. We're going to continue this conversation in our last segment, but we have to just take a brief break for now. When we return, our panel will conclude their conversation. But first, let's look at this tribute, which is very special to me. A recent event made me think of how the vessels we served on will always be a part of us. In November of 2020, the USS Bonhammershard was decommissioned and dismantled for scrap. The Bonhammershard LHD-6 was always considered cursed by Marines and sailors. With the number 6 marked 3 times on the ship, it certainly felt like bad things were going to happen. The ship's first deployment resulted in a helicopter accident that killed several Marines and sailors. On the ship's third deployment, taking Marines to Iraq, it had significant mechanical failure, resulting in the need for quick repairs. Many events, including its eventual complete destruction by fire, challenged the Bonhammershard's naval career. But despite these challenges, the ship will always hold a special place in my heart. Having lived aboard the Bonnie Dick for 7 months and sailing halfway around the world, I can remember in great detail how that ship made me feel. Its smells, its large presence, and its sounds are all stored in my memory. The ship felt alive, and I feel so proud to have been a part of its journey. Welcome back. We're talking with veterans who have been through the justice system. We're also talking to the public defender and the district attorney, or deputy district attorney and deputy public defender. I want to get everyone's titles correct there. But we want to welcome you also to contact us with questions or comments. Tonight, a very important conversation, veterans and the legal justice system. And if you've been watching, you've probably learned that there are different perspectives on how to go about ensuring that we honor veterans and their military service while helping them through a difficult time in their life when they encounter the legal justice system. If you want to be a part of this conversation, call us at 925-313-1170. Send us a message through Facebook at Veterans Voices 1, or email us, veteransvoices@ContraCostaTV.org. In fact, we do have a question from our audience. So I want to bring this up first, and then we'll continue in the conversation from where Ron left off. How often do you encounter women veterans in the legal justice system? I guess this is a good question in regards to what portion of the population are women veterans in the legal justice system?
Would you like to answer that?
Well, let's start with the Veterans Treatment Court. What percentage of women are in the Veterans Treatment Court, approximately?
I think it's 5 to 10%, I would say. There aren't too many.
It's a very small percentage relative to the overall population in Veterans Treatment Court. In a lot of ways, it probably tracks the number of women who are in the criminal court system generally, that the vast majority of the people that are in the criminal court system happen to be males rather than females.
There are less than 100 in the California prison system, scattered throughout 3 prisons for women. So, I mean, if you take 6,900 veterans in the California system and less than 100 are women, that kind of supports what Brandon's saying.
So what I'm hearing, and we know that the women veteran population is smaller than the male veteran population, but also the population in the criminal justice system is smaller for women as well. I don't think I knew that. So I appreciate our audience's question on that. Very good to know. Picking up, Ron, where you left off, and I want to maybe spend this last segment on what steps we might take to move forward. I hear in the past, we didn't have things like Veterans Treatment Court, and we didn't have certain types of rehab or programs in the prison system. But if we were to spend this segment redesigning the legal justice system for veterans, what would that look like? And how might we, or what resources might we pull from to implement that?
For me, I don't know, Tommy, did you want to say anything? I don't want
to. Go ahead. I'll probably say something contradictory.
Well, I don't know. For me, I saw one of the questions. There wasn't a lot for veterans in the prison system, hence me creating a program, Veterans Healing Veterans. There are currently a bill going through right now. I think it's Senator Min, who is, I think it's Bill 763. Don't quote me on that. That addresses going back now for veterans that are incarcerated doing their time, where it will take into account their PTSD and get them back before the judges for resentencing if they have a valid case of PTSD. So there's a lot of stuff going on within the prison system and the justice system. Some people ask, why should veterans get a second bite at the apple? I've been asked that question by some prosecutors, not in an antagonistic way, just, what's your thoughts on that? And for me, it's real simple. Veterans, unlike the rest of the population in the prison system, have served. They have things available to them by definition of their service that the general population prisoner does not have. And there is no excuse for a veteran to go back to prison once released if these benefits they have available to them are utilized. Most veterans don't know what they have available to them.
Tommy, your thoughts?
I went to unmute my mic. So I think that honestly, that if you want to look at what to do with the veterans in the prison system needs to be relooked at as a whole in itself, and relook at everybody that's in there that has a mental health diagnosis or potentially could have a mental health diagnosis. And this is why I said I'd be contradictive, because I'm an anomaly as a veteran. I don't know many other like me, but I don't want to be treated different. I'm not different. I'm not special. And so to try to put me through a different program because I was a drug addict, Brandon brought up earlier that I was a drug addict, or that possibly could have been a drug addict, because of the sacrifices and the things that the military put me through because of my time in service. And for me to try to say that I stepped on a bomb and that made me a drug addict, I feel like I would be lying to you and anybody else I said it. I actually said it in front of the judge that convicted me. I said, no, I do drugs because I want to, not because there's anything wrong with me. And so I think that we also should look at accountability. All these other programs are incredible. It is absolutely incredible to try to help people, to give them a second chance. But what makes them special? And don't get me wrong, and that's coming from a veteran, a person that served. And I'm not trying to discredit anybody's service, but what makes them special? I was a drug addict, and I know several other drug addicts. And so because I decided to serve, I decided to join, I deserve special treatment. Like, no, I think that the whole system needs to be relooked at. And I can only speak to substance abuse. I can't speak to any other things. The only people I really know that have gone through trials have been substance abuse. But I think that whole thing needs revamped. To treat me different because I signed on a line? No, that's...
Well, it's an interesting perspective, and I certainly don't disagree with it. But let me ask the question, what if the community wanted to offer this as an appreciation of your military service, just like benefits like VA healthcare or the GI Bill? So as a way for our community to say, thank you, you served our country honorably. You may be a drug addict, and you may choose to use, but because you served honorably, we want to give you this second chance. I'm just asking that as a question who often tries to help veterans understand that benefits are available as a means to our community to say thank you.
if you had a seeing eye dog that was supposed to walk you around and you were thankful for its service, but every time you turned around, you tripped over a couch cushion because it tore it apart, should you still be thankful for the dog?
I guess that's your way of saying no. Okay. All right. Well, hey, I just figured I'd ask the question. Certainly, again, my role is here not to disagree with our panel, but.
No, the only thing I could think of was to respond with a question to try to have everybody that heard me understand my perspective.
And respect your perspective as well. Thoughts on this, Brandon and Derek, in regards to moving forward and how veterans who encounter the justice system could be better served?
I agree with Tommy to a certain extent. There are plenty of veterans out there trying to get through Veterans Court who aren't deserving. But we have to include a few of those when we want to truly help the ones that are deserving. And I disagree with Tommy where he's kind of discounting that sacrifice. And I see him as making a huge sacrifice. Maybe that didn't trigger the drug abuse. And if it didn't, then that statute doesn't apply to you. And I respect you for recognizing that. But if it does apply to you, we want to help you because you signed up to protect us and you got messed up because of it. It makes perfect sense to me. And the more we can do that, the better. However, when the crimes are super serious, we also have to recognize there are victims. And I know Ron knows that and doesn't disagree with this. There's a balance there because they demand justice as well. And it's a system not just for veterans, it's a system for everyone, theoretically. And so we have to balance that. I think a lot of things are happening to lessen penalties, and maybe that's the direction we're going in for a long time to come.
So what I'm hearing from you, Derek, is the integrity of Veterans Treatment Court really is dependent upon the veteran themselves saying, this incident is tied directly to my military service. I think that's an important point to make, and that's what Tommy's afforded here. Brandon, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that, so Tommy brings up a couple of really important points. I think one thing that he emphasized was was accountability. And one thing that I see with a lot of the clients I serve, particularly the veterans and Veterans Treatment Court, is that accountability piece. And sometimes what I have found is that veterans are really hard on themselves because they take a lot of responsibility for what they did. Part of the reason why they are veterans is because they are individuals that are selfless, that they've made these sacrifices, that they take ownership of what they do. But I also think that the criminal court system needs to provide some space and some opportunity for individuals that have come through the criminal court system to support them, even if they think that they don't deserve that support or aren't in need of that support. And I think Veterans Treatment Court does a really good job of providing the space to do that.
I think that's a really good point. I witnessed that certainly in the work that the County Veteran Service Office does. A lot of veterans, it's a very slippery slope, but they'll say things like, I don't have it as bad as this other veteran. Or I'm not injured physically, so I don't deserve compensation or health care. So I can relate to that. A lot of veterans do need someone to help them, kind of slow things down a little bit and take a little bit better inventory of what they are enduring, what they're going through. Because there is a very strong suck it up mentality in the military that carries forward. We have about 2 minutes. Final thoughts on tonight's topic from our panel.
Yeah, real quick. I'd just like to say something to Tommy in reflection to Tommy. Tommy, in true Marine Corps fashion, we didn't join the Corps to get medals and accolades for what we did. Not taken away from any other branches, but other branches do that more than we do. I agree with Tommy and I disagree. I've worked with so many veterans over the past decade that take the exact stance that Tommy takes. There's nothing special about me. I did what I did. I'm not asking for thanks or anything. I made my choices. Let me do me. I agree with that. I respect that, but I want to continue to try to help the Tommies and Tommy see that he did make a tremendous sacrifice. California's acknowledged it by creating the first veterans hub in the nation. I was fortunate to be a part of that, spearhead that, where we have an entire prison that's nothing but veterans are at that prison now, with veterans programming, support from the VA, working with courts on resentencing. Sometimes veterans just need to be led a little bit more, I guess, and made to understand that they do have a little more coming than other people, especially the sacrifices that Marines and service members like Tommy have endured.
Tommy, I'll give you the final 30 seconds.
You want in my opinion, the most important, the most influential thing to help veterans correct their course is reignite their passion and purpose in life. When we were in the military, we had a purpose. I was a team leader. I made sure that my team was okay. And now I get up in the morning and pick out which color underwear I want to wear. It's the most difficult choice I have to make. Reinstill purpose, and they will lead the way.
Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, thank you all. I honor your service. Brandon and Derek, I honor your community service as well to our veterans. I think a lot of veterans' lives will be changed because of the work that all of you are doing. So I appreciate our audience as well for being a part of this conversation. This concludes our panel discussion. We hope you enjoyed it. Please stay tuned to hear a Veteran's Voice. This month's Veterans Voices correspondent, Noga Kessler, talks with Marine veteran Sherman Gillums, Jr.
Good evening and welcome to A Veteran's Voice. I'm Noga Kessler, Veterans Voices correspondent, and today we have with us Sherman Gillums Jr. Welcome, Sherman.
Thank you, Noga.
Sherman enlisted in the Marine Corps at the age of 17 in the year 1990 and served until 2002. And he retired as a Chief Warrant Officer in 2002. So why don't we start, Sherman, if you could share with us a little bit about what brought you to join the military.
As a 17-year-old, you don't think much about why you do things beyond how cool it might be. So I think as a kid, it just seemed pretty cool to leave home. I lived in Buffalo, New York. That's where I grew up. And I wanted a job where I could be proud. I think I was in search of an identity. And certainly the recruiting materials make a compelling case for a pretty cool identity when you're a kid in high school. I was smart enough to go to college. I just wasn't encouraged to do so. And the military was going to pay for a lot of things that we couldn't afford to pay for, such as school and just leaving home. So why the Marine Corps? It was just about wanting to be a part of the best in my mind. And I thought at that time that the Marine Corps, if I wanted to be the best, I had to be among the best. And so that's why I made the choice to go into that branch. But the military itself had been in my family for generations. My grandfather served in Korea. He had brothers and uncles, and they served in every war, every branch of the service. So it was probably as much in my DNA as it was in my desire to be something. And it was a great experience because it was the first time I could see America in its fullness. And what I mean by that is I saw people from all over the country in every shade of skin color, every socioeconomic background. We all got our heads shaved. We all had the same uniform on, and we were all expected to do the same thing. And that's where you get the best appreciation of just how much we all have in common in terms of our humanity and how similar we are despite where we come from. But that shaped my early insights into humanity and our responsibility to, and it is a responsibility to look for the similarities rather than the differences, because that's the only way the Marine Corps functions, is us being on one accord. And so I spent the next 12 years after that under that sort of culture where you didn't look at who somebody was, you looked at what they could do more than anything. And I really liked that, the sort of upbringing in my young adulthood, because it would later inform how I would lead. I was a drill instructor myself. I got to train over 400 young men and make them Marines as well. So I got to sort of return the favor and move that process myself. So that even helped me even have develop a deeper understanding, because then I had to be the one who shaped their thinking. And it wasn't that hard when you get enough people together who want the same thing.
When you left the military, sir, and I know we talk about this all the time, and it's such an important thing to talk about, The transition. How was the transition for you when you left the military?
The transition for me when I left the military was not the way any of us want to leave the military, involuntarily due to injury. I was in a vehicle crash where I'd suffered an injury to my spinal cord, and because of that, I wasn't fit for duty. And it happened so fast. I was 29 years old. It happened so fast that there's no way to prepare for that. There's no, financially, mentally, you do what you can physically and mentally because you have to recover, but there's no way that even as you prepare for war and combat and the possibility of catastrophic injury and limbs missing and things like that, it doesn't, when it happens so fast and under circumstances you don't expect, that's not ideal. So there's no pride in it. And because of that, and at the same time, you're losing that identity that you fought for. In my case, since I was 17, it stripped away everything I had. I felt I had everything gone in a blink. And so leaving that behind was very tough. And I had to recreate an identity that I'd never had before as an adult. Having to sit for a job interview and write a resume. I'd never had to do that before. So I had to get involved in living life, quote unquote, normally, like most people, but I was at a big disadvantage because I also had to recover before I can get to that level of normalcy.
Who were those that assisted you? Was there a particular place that really kind of helped you through? Who were those folks?
I've had the honor of going back and help young men and women who shared a similar story because I understood what worked for me. And what worked for me was for the first time seeing an individual who had suffered the same injury that I'd suffered and was maybe about 10 or 15 years removed. So it was kind of like a preview of what was ahead. And to the extent that those individuals were filled with optimism, with purpose, with vitality, it felt good. It felt like I had a chance and I was going to be okay because I see what it looks like, despite having to live in this way that I could never conceive or see myself even enduring. Now I see what it looks like. And I think that peer connection was important early. So the earlier you can get people around individuals who suffer a catastrophic event, even if it's trauma that doesn't necessarily injure you in some physical way, having people who understand is the first step. And of course, we can talk about medicine and therapies and all the other interventions, but I think the real magic happens when you surround yourself with people who know what you've been through. And I think that was the most important step for me in my recovery.
And sir, what now are you involved in? What types of things are you doing right now?
I decided to take a chance and move clear across the United States and work in Washington, D.C. In the belly of the beast, as some of us put it, and try to change laws and advocate for people who have no voice. That's been a big part of my identity, is giving people a voice who have no voice. And so I went to D.C. with the idea being that we would change life for veterans with severe injuries and illnesses, as well as their families and the survivors they leave behind. And I spent about 16 years doing that before mental illness advocacy grabbed me and pulled me. So now I work in an organization that focuses on advocating for individuals who live with mental condition, in some cases mental illnesses, but still have a chance to live if given the right support.
We are so lucky to have you, sir, in wherever you go, in your advocacy and the work that you do and how you serve. So appreciate that. Thank you so much, sir. It was an absolute privilege to have you on our Veterans Voice, and we wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
We hope you found Sherman Gillums Jr. inspirational. Now we want to end the show on a lighter note by visiting our own Corporal Schmuckatelli of the 1st Civ Div down in the Veterans Voices news bunker.
I'm your host, Corporal Schmuckatelli, and welcome to a new segment of Scuttlebutt. We are surprised we're still on air, seriously. Today's theme is space, the final frontier. Until we find another one, actually. Our top story, an elite team of well-trained Space Force Guardians. Come on, guys. Guardians, you should have switched it to Space Marines. Come on, guys, what are we doing? Well, anyway, Space Force Guardians, right, have discovered oil on the surface of Mars. The United States of America has tasked space pioneer Elon Musk to retrieve the oil with full support of the United States Armed Forces. Elon Musk has already drawn up plans for the first FOB on Mars. Here it is now.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag. Ooh, they're red, white, and blue.
Although the FOB hasn't been built yet, the local Martians are not happy with the prospect of U.S. troops on their homeland soil. The most outspoken leader of the Martian resistance is Martian Bin Laden. He said in a statement, boop boop, beep boop, beep boop boop. We are still currently unable to translate it because the Defense Language Institute does not know how to speak Martian yet. The Space Force Supreme Galactic Commander, Marvin, has issued a public statement to such allegations saying that
threats to the United States foreign policy will be met with complete annihilation. Resistance is futile.
Wow, glad he's on our side, guys.
We will be recruiting personnel, even veterans, to this great cause. The Space Force will swell with numbers as we conquer the solar system and beyond.
If that doesn't motivate you, I don't know what will. Supreme Galactic Commander Marvin also commissioned a new recruitment poster. There it is. In fact, I'm motivated.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Broken. I think it's. Yeah. Abort mission. It's broken. Now Space Force will never take me.
Thank you for tuning in to the show tonight. We hope you got a laugh out of this month's Scuttlebutt, and we were able to shed some light on veterans and the justice system. If you want to know more about Veterans Treatment Court in Contra Costa County, go to cc-courts.org and look for Collaborative Justice Courts. If you're interested in setting up a Veterans Treatment Court where you live, contact Justice for Vets at justiceforvets.org or call 703-575-9400. Veterans Healing Veterans from the Inside Out is a trauma recovery and suicide prevention program for veterans. Reach them at veteranshealingveterans.com or call 831-883-8387, extension 242. The annual Contra Costa County Veterans Day ceremony will take place on Tuesday, November 9th at 11 a.m. Tune in to CCTV to watch live. There will be a pop-up museum honoring the contributions of diverse ethnic groups to the Allied offensive in World War II from November 11th to the 14th at the Veterans Memorial Building in Danville. To learn more, contact info@stephenburchick.com or call 925-998-9433. Veterans Voices is brought to you in part by contributions from the Veterans Affordable Home Program, serving those who have served us, ensuring the American dream for our veterans. The Diablo Valley Veterans Foundation, dedicated to helping veterans near you. American Legion Post 246, honoring the tradition of the American Legion in Danville. To rewatch tonight's episode, check back on our homepage later this week or check your cable provider's schedule for rebroadcast times. You can also rewatch this episode and many others on our YouTube channel, Veterans Voices of Contra Costa, so be sure to subscribe. Our next show will air on Monday, November 8th at 7 p.m. We will talk about discharge upgrades. Be sure to tune in. To all of our veterans and their families, thanks for watching and have a great evening.